The Velthari had been watching Earth for 50 years. Their observation ships hid in the darkness beyond the moon, recording everything. They watched humans build cities and tear them down. They watched wars begin and end. They studied human language, human culture, and human weakness. Commander Zervith stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the blue planet on his screen. He had conquered 11 worlds before this one. Each conquest had been simple. Show strength. Make threats. Watch the weak species surrender. It was the way of the galaxy. The strong ruled. The weak obeyed. Humans would be no different. The fleet moved into position above Earth on a Tuesday morning. 12 massive warships, each one 5 miles long, descended through the clouds over the largest human cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Los Angeles. The shadows of the ships blocked out the sun. Jack Morrison was drinking coffee in his small apartment in Chicago when he heard the screaming outside. He was a captain in the Air Force, home on leave after a long deployment. He ran to his window and looked up. The ship above Chicago was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It hung in the sky like a mountain turned upside down. Weapons covered its surface. Lights blinked in patterns he could not understand. His phone rang. Then it rang again. Then it did not stop ringing. Within 1 hour, every television and radio on Earth carried the same message. The aliens spoke in perfect English, perfect Chinese, perfect Spanish, perfect every language. They had learned well during their 50 years of watching. We are the Velthari Dominion. Your planet now belongs to us. You have 72 hours to surrender all governments to our control. If you do not surrender, we will destroy your cities one by one until you do. Do not test us. We have done this many times before. Resistance is foolish. Resistance is death. The message repeated every 15 minutes. Jack Morrison drove to the nearest Air Force base as fast as his car could go. The roads were chaos. Some people were running. Some people were crying. Some people were just standing still, looking up at the sky with empty eyes. But Jack noticed something else too. He saw people helping each other. He saw strangers pushing broken cars off the road. He saw a group of young men carrying an old woman to safety. Even in fear, humans were reaching out to each other. He arrived at the base to find it already full of soldiers who had come without being called. They stood in groups, talking quietly, waiting for orders that had not yet come. General Patricia Hayes found him in the crowd. She was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had fought in 3 wars and had planned to retire next year. Now she stood in front of a map of the world, covered in red marks showing the positions of alien ships. "Morrison," she said. "Good. I need pilots who can think." "What are our orders?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. "Right now, our orders are to wait. Every government on Earth is talking to every other government. Things that would have taken years to negotiate are happening in hours. The president is on the phone with Moscow and Beijing at the same time." Jack looked at the map. "Are we going to surrender?" General Hayes shook her head slowly. "I have been a soldier for 35 years. I have seen humanity at its worst. I have seen us do terrible things to each other. But I have also seen us do something no other species in this galaxy seems to understand. What is that? We come together when it matters. We fight. Not because we think we will win. We fight because giving up is not in our nature." On the other side of the world, Dr. Kate Sullivan sat in a cold room in Geneva. She was a linguist, a person who studied languages. 3 hours ago, she had been teaching a class at a university. Now she sat in front of a computer, trying to decode alien communications that military satellites had intercepted. She was not alone. Scientists from 20 different countries worked beside her. They had been strangers this morning. Now, they shared coffee and ideas like old friends. Kate found something interesting in the alien signals. She called over Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a Japanese code expert, and Dr. Hans Mueller, a German mathematician. "Look at this," she said. "The Velthari communications are very organized, very structured. Everything follows a clear pattern." Dr. Tanaka nodded. "Military communication. Very efficient." Kate pointed at her screen. "But there is no variation. No backup plans. No discussion of what to do if something goes wrong." Dr. Mueller understood immediately. "They have never had anything go wrong. They expect us to surrender. They have no plan for, if we do not." Kate felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to realize it was hope. In Chicago, Jack Morrison stood on the roof of the airbase and watched the alien ship hover over the lake. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. The setting sun reflected off its metal surface in colors he had never seen before. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister in Texas. She had 2 children, ages 6 and 9. The message was simple: "Come home if you can. But if you cannot, give them hell." Jack typed back, "I will." He did not know if humanity could win this fight. He did not know if they had any chance at all against technology so far beyond their own. But he knew one thing. With complete certainty, they would fight. Across the world, the same scene repeated itself in 1,000 different ways. Soldiers reported for duty without being ordered. Factories began converting their machines to make weapons. Scientists shared secrets they had guarded for decades. Old enemies made phone calls and set aside old hate. The Velthari watched from their ships and did not understand what they were seeing. Their records showed that conquered species always reacted the same way. First came denial, then fear, then acceptance, then surrender. Humanity was not following the pattern. Commander Zirveth received report after report from his ground observers. The humans were not panicking. They were organizing. They were preparing. For what? One of his officers asked. Zirveth did not have an answer. No species had ever prepared to fight the Dominion. The very idea was absurd. The Velthari had weapons that could crack planets in half. They had shields that could stop nuclear explosions. They had conquered races far more advanced than these primitive humans. And yet something bothered him. Something in the way the humans moved. Something in their eyes. He had seen fear in the eyes of 100 conquered peoples. Fear and despair and broken hope. In human eyes, he saw something different. He saw anger. 70 hours remained until the deadline. The humans were not going to surrender, and the Velthari Dominion had no idea what was coming. 60 hours remained when the world changed in ways no one had ever imagined possible. In Moscow, President Viktor Volkov picked up a red telephone that had not been used in 30 years. On the other end was the American president, Margaret Cole. They had never spoken directly before. Their nations had spent decades pointing weapons at each other. Volkov spoke first. "We have 300 nuclear missiles ready to launch. Where do you want them aimed?" "Oh, President Cole did not hesitate. "Same place as ours. The big ship over Los Angeles." For the first time in history, Russian and American nuclear weapons would fly toward the same target. In Beijing, similar calls were being made. The Chinese military shared satellite data with Japan and South Korea. India and Pakistan, enemies for 70 years, combined their air forces into a single command. Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire that no one had thought possible. Old hatreds did not disappear. They were simply pushed aside. There would be time for disagreement later. First, there was a war to win. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Ben Carter worked in a laboratory that did not officially exist. He had spent 15 years studying a piece of metal that had fallen from space. The military had found it in the desert and brought it to him. It was Velthari technology, from a probe that had crashed decades ago. For 15 years, the metal had refused to give up its secrets. It was too advanced, too alien. Now, with 60 hours left before the end of the world, Ben Carter finally saw what he had been missing. Dr. Laura Kim, his assistant, looked over his shoulder at the computer screen. You found something. Ben nodded slowly. We have been trying to understand their technology by our rules. But their technology does not follow our rules. It follows theirs. What does that mean, Laura? Their systems are perfect. Every circuit, every connection, every signal. Perfect. No errors, no randomness, no chaos. She frowned. That sounds like a good thing. Ben turned to face her. His eyes were bright with excitement. It is a good thing. For them. Their ships run like perfect machines because they expect a perfect universe. But we do not live in a perfect universe. We live in a messy one. And our technology is messy too. Laura began to understand. Our electronics are full of noise, interference, random signals that we filter out. Exactly. Their systems are not built to handle noise. They have never needed to. They have never fought a species as chaotic as us. Ben pulled up a diagram on his screen. If we can generate enough random signals, enough electronic noise, we can overwhelm their systems. Their perfect machines will not know what to do with imperfect information. You want to confuse them to death, Laura said. Ben smiled. Something like that. 3,000 miles away, Admiral Sam Hutchins stood on the deck of an aircraft carrier in the Pacific Ocean. Around him, the largest fleet ever assembled was taking shape. American ships sailed beside Chinese destroyers. Russian submarines surfaced next to British vessels. Japanese carriers coordinated with Australian frigates. It was beautiful and strange and a little bit terrifying. So many old enemies, now working as one. Hutchins had been in the Navy for 40 years. He had trained his whole life to fight certain enemies. Now, those enemies stood beside him on the same deck, wearing different uniforms, but sharing the same purpose. A Chinese admiral named Chen Wei approached him. Admiral Hutchins, my government has ordered me to place my fleet under your command. Hutchins shook his hand. Admiral Chen, your submarines are better than ours for this mission. I want them leading the first wave. Chen Wei looked surprised for a moment. Then he smiled. You are a practical man, Admiral. I like that. Practical men win wars, Hutchins replied. Back in Geneva, Kate Sullivan had not slept in 36 hours. Her team had decoded more Velthari communications. What they found was both frightening and encouraging. The Velthari had conquered many species, but they had never fought a real war. Every conquest had been the same. They arrived with overwhelming force. The target species saw they could not win. The target species surrendered. Simple, clean, easy. The Velthari military had no experience with actual combat. Their soldiers were trained for occupation, not warfare. Their tactics assumed the enemy would always run away. Humans did not run away. Kate shared her findings with the military commanders. General Hayes listened carefully, then asked the question everyone was thinking. So they have better weapons, better ships, better everything. But they do not know how to fight? Kate nodded. They know how to threaten. They know how to destroy. But fighting, real fighting, where the enemy hits back, that is something they have never done. General Hayes smiled grimly. Then we need to teach them. 48 hours remained. Around the world, humans prepared for battle. Soldiers checked their weapons and said goodbye to their families. Scientists worked through the night to build devices they had designed only hours before. Factory workers produced ammunition and equipment at speeds that should have been impossible. But the most important preparations happened in smaller places. In a church in Alabama, an old preacher led his congregation in prayer, not for victory, but for the courage to face whatever came. In a school in France, a teacher told her students to go home and hug their parents. In a hospital in Brazil, doctors made plans to treat casualties they hoped would never come. Ordinary people did ordinary things with extraordinary courage. Commander Zirveth received new reports from his observers on the ground. What he read made no sense to him. The humans are building weapons, his officer reported. Many weapons. But they are strange weapons. Not like anything we have seen before. Strange how? The officer hesitated. They are messy, crude. Many of them look like they should not work at all. Zirveth dismissed the concern. Primitive species often make primitive weapons in desperation. They will be useless against our shields. But the officer did not look convinced. Commander, there is something else. The humans are communicating with each other constantly. Not just their military. Everyone. They are sharing information, sharing plans, sharing ideas. It is like watching a single organism with billions of cells. They are social creatures, Zirveth said. The officer nodded and left. But Zirveth remained at his window, watching the planet below. Something was wrong. He could feel it. This species was not behaving like the others. They were not surrendering. They were not fleeing. They were not even negotiating. They were preparing. But preparing for what? No species could match Velthari technology. It was impossible. The math simply did not allow it. And yet humans did not seem to care about math. They cared about something else. Something Zirveth had seen in their communications but could not quite understand. They called it hope. 24 hours remained. The deadline was approaching, and humanity was ready. The first battle of the war happened in Berlin on a cold morning, when the fog was still thick on the ground. Commander Zirveth had grown impatient. The deadline was 12 hours away, and the humans still had not surrendered. He decided to send a message. 2,000 Velthari soldiers would land in the center of Berlin. They would take control of the city. The humans would see that resistance was pointless. It was supposed to be easy. Sergeant Danny Cole crouched behind a concrete barrier and watched the alien dropships descend through the fog. He was 28 years old, born in Ohio. And he had joined the army because his father and grandfather had served before him. He had seen combat in 2 deployments overseas. This was different. Beside him were soldiers from 5 different countries. German troops held the left flank. French soldiers guarded the right. Polish and British forces waited in the buildings above. They had trained separately their entire lives. They had different languages, different traditions, different ways of fighting. None of that mattered now. The dropships landed. Velthari soldiers emerged in perfect formation. Their armor was black and shiny. Their weapons hummed with energy that made the air feel strange. They moved like machines, each step exactly the same as the last. Danny raised his rifle. It felt small and weak compared to what the aliens carried, but his hands were steady. His breathing was calm. Hold, came the order through his radio. Wait for them to enter the kill zone. The Velthari advanced. They did not take cover. They did not spread out. They simply walked forward, confident that nothing could hurt them. Their shields glowed faintly as they moved. Personal energy barriers that could stop bullets and explosions. Human weapons would bounce off them like raindrops off a window. At least, that was what the aliens believed. Now, the voice said. Danny pressed his trigger. So did every other soldier in the city. The noise was like the end of the world. Thousands of weapons fired at once. Rockets and grenades and bullets filled the air. The street where the Velthari walked became a storm of fire and metal. When the smoke cleared, Danny expected to see the aliens still standing. Their shields were too strong. Their armor was too thick. But they were not standing. Their shields had held against the first wave. Then the second. But the attack did not stop. It kept coming. Wave after wave of fire. From every direction. Without pause. Without mercy. Human weapons were not as powerful as Velthari weapons. But there were more of them. Many more. And humans did not fight fair. The Velthari shields flickered. Then, they failed. When the aliens finally tried to retreat, they found their path blocked. While they had been focused on the soldiers in front, civilians had moved behind them. Old men and women, teenagers, shopkeepers, and teachers. They carried hunting rifles, and kitchen knives, and baseball bats. They were not soldiers. They did not know how to fight, but they did not run. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the streets of Berlin were covered in broken alien armor. 2,000 Velthari soldiers had landed. Less than 100 escaped. Human casualties were heavy. Many good people died that day, but they died fighting. They died standing up, and they won. Commander Zirveth received the news in silence. He stood on his bridge and listened to his officers describe what had happened. Their voices shook. They had never seen anything like it. How? Zirveth finally asked. How did they break our shields? They did not break them, his tactical officer answered. They exhausted them. They hit us with more firepower than our shields could absorb. Not stronger firepower. Just more. They attacked from every angle at once. They never stopped. They never paused to regroup. They fought like animals, another officer said with disgust. No, said a quiet voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned. Ambassador Kethra stepped forward. She was the fleet's cultural expert. Her job was to understand conquered species and manage their transition to dominion rule. They did not fight like animals, she said. Animals fight to survive. They run when the fight is lost. These humans kept fighting even when they were dying. They kept fighting even when there was no hope. Zirveth frowned. Then what are they? Kethra walked to the window and looked down at the blue planet. I have studied their history. All of it. Thousands of years of records. Do you know what I found? Tell us. They have always been like this. They fight each other constantly. They have wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things that do not even make sense. They burned their own cities. They destroyed their own people. They split the atom just to build bigger bombs. She turned back to face the commander. We thought that made them weak. We thought a species that could not stop fighting itself would fall apart under pressure. We were wrong. What do you mean? Kethra's voice was soft but clear. Commander, they have been practicing. Every war they have fought against each other. Every battle, every conflict for thousands of years. It was all practice. They did not know it. But they were preparing for something like this. They were getting better at fighting. Generation after generation. Century after century. She pointed at the reports on the tactical display. We have conquered species that had better technology than humans. Species that were more intelligent, more logical, more organized. But none of them could do what these humans did today. None of them would even try. Why not? Zirveth demanded. What makes humans different? Ambassador Kethra considered the question carefully before answering. They have a word, she said. Spite. It means they will hurt themselves to hurt their enemy. They will die if it means their enemy dies too. They will sacrifice everything, not to win, but to make sure their opponent loses. She shook her head slowly. No other species we have encountered has this quality. It is irrational. It is self-destructive. But in battle, it makes them terrifying. Commander Zirveth looked out at Earth. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The deadline was still 6 hours away. The humans had not surrendered. They had fought back, and they had won the first battle. In the streets of Berlin, Danny Cole sat against a wall and tried to stop his hands from shaking. Around him, soldiers from 5 nations checked on their wounded and counted their dead. A German medic handed him a cup of water. He drank it without tasting it. We did it, someone said. Danny nodded. But he knew this was only the beginning. The aliens had sent 2,000 soldiers. They had millions more on their ships. The next attack would be worse. But as he looked around at the faces of the people who had fought beside him, strangers who had become brothers in a single morning, Danny felt something he had not expected. Pride. They had shown the aliens what humans were made of. Now they just had to do it again, and again, and again, until the war was won, the deadline passed, and humanity did not surrender. Commander Zirveth stood on his bridge and stared at the planet below. In his entire career, no species had ever refused to submit. The Dominion had given them 72 hours. That time was over. Now there would be consequences. He gave the order. The weapon arrays on his flagship powered up. They would destroy one city as an example. Then, the humans would understand. Then, they would beg for mercy. He chose Chicago. Jack Morrison was in the air when the alien ship began to glow. He flew an F-35 fighter jet, modified in ways that would have been impossible a week ago. Dr. Ben Carter's team had worked without sleep to install the new systems. They called it the Scrambler. It was not a weapon that could hurt the alien ships. Human weapons were still too weak for that. But the Scrambler could do something almost as important. It could confuse them. Jack flew straight toward the massive alien vessel. His radar showed him a dozen other pilots doing the same thing. Americans, Russians, Chinese, Japanese. They flew in formation like they had trained together for years instead of days. The alien weapon was almost ready to fire. Jack could see the energy building in its core. One shot would turn Chicago into a crater. He pressed a button on his control stick. The Scrambler activated. It sent out a wave of random signals, electronic noise that filled the air like invisible screaming. The signal was chaos. Pure chaos. Every frequency at once, every pattern at the same time, contradicting itself 1,000 times per second. Human electronics were built to filter out noise. They expected it. They handled it without even noticing. Velthari electronics were not. On the alien bridge, alarms began to sound. Screens flickered. Systems that had worked perfectly for centuries suddenly stopped responding. The weapon array, moments from firing, went dark. "What is happening?" Commander Zerveth demanded. His officers scrambled to find answers. "Unknown interference," one shouted. "Our systems cannot process it. The signals make no sense. Filter them out. We cannot. There are too many. They are everywhere." The Velthari ship hung helpless in the sky. Its weapons were offline. Its shields flickered and jumped between power levels. Its sensors showed nothing but static. And then the missiles came. Colonel Amy Peters commanded the second wave of the attack. She sat in a bunker in Nevada, watching her screens as hundreds of missiles launched from every continent at once. They had planned this carefully. One chance. One moment. When the alien shields were weak, they could not waste it. The missiles flew from submarines and ships and hidden bases. American missiles, and Russian missiles, and Chinese missiles, all heading toward the same target. Weapons that humans had built to use against each other, now working together. They struck the alien command ship like a fist made of fire. The explosion lit up the sky over Los Angeles. People on the ground watched and cheered and cried. The massive ship, 5 miles long and covered in weapons that could destroy cities, shuddered and began to fall. It crashed into the Pacific Ocean, 100 miles from the coast. The impact created waves that flooded beaches from California to Mexico. But the ship was down. The humans had destroyed their first alien warship. Commander Zirveth survived. His escape pod carried him to another vessel in the fleet. He stumbled onto the bridge, burned and bleeding, and found his officers in chaos. Reports flooded in from around the world. Human forces were attacking everywhere. In Tokyo, civilian boats rammed a Velthari landing craft, while military jets provided cover. In Moscow, artillery coordinated with drones to destroy an alien supply convoy. In the countryside of Texas, a farmer named Greg Palmer led his neighbors in an ambush on a Velthari patrol. Zirveth read the report about Palmer with growing disbelief. The human had no military training. He had only hunting rifles and homemade explosives. But he had killed 17 Velthari soldiers before disappearing into the hills. When scouts captured him hours later, they asked him why he had fought. His answer was transmitted to the fleet. "My daughter is 6 years old," Palmer had said. "She loves dinosaurs. She sleeps with a stuffed dinosaur every night. You think I am going to let something from space come and take her world?" You think any of us will? Zirveth put down the report. His hands were shaking. He had conquered species with technology that matched the Dominion. Species with vast armies and powerful weapons. None of them had fought like this. None of them had thrown themselves into battle with such complete disregard for their own lives. The humans were winning. Not because they were stronger. Not because they had better weapons. They were winning because they would not stop. Could not stop. Would not even consider the possibility of surrender. In Geneva, Kate Sullivan received word of the successful attack. She had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes burned and her hands trembled when she tried to type. But when she heard that the command ship was down, she laughed until she cried. Around her, scientists from every nation embraced each other. Germans hugged French. Chinese shook hands with Japanese. Russians kissed Americans on both cheeks. For one brief moment, there were no nations. There were no old enemies. There was only humanity. United, victorious, and refusing to die. The celebration did not last long. There were still 11 alien ships in orbit. The war was far from over. But something had changed. The Velthari knew they could be hurt, and humanity knew they could win. Admiral Sam Hutchins received new orders on his aircraft carrier. The Pacific Fleet, now combined with the navies of a dozen nations, would hunt down the damaged alien ships. They would not wait to be attacked. They would become the attackers. On the shore of Lake Michigan, General Patricia Hayes watched the sunrise. Chicago was still standing. Her soldiers had done what everyone thought was impossible. An aide approached her. General, we are receiving a transmission from the Velthari fleet. They want to negotiate. Want to negotiate. Hayes did not smile. She had been a soldier too long to celebrate early. Tell them we are listening, she said. But tell them something else too. What is that? Tell them that surrender is no longer on the table. They came to our world. They threatened our people. They tried to destroy our cities. She looked up at the sky, where the remaining alien ships were now in retreat. Now they will learn what happens when you make humanity angry. The war was not over, but the tide had turned, and the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. On the 4th day, the Velthari Dominion retreated from Earth. Commander Zirveth gave the order himself. His fleet had lost 4 ships. Thousands of soldiers were dead or captured. The humans had not stopped attacking for even a single hour. And more importantly, they showed no signs of stopping. Ever. Every time the Velthari destroyed a human weapon, 2 more appeared. Every time they killed human soldiers, more arrived to take their place. Every time they thought the fight was over, it began again. It was not a war. It was something else. Something the Dominion had never faced. Zirveth stood on the bridge of his damaged ship and watched Earth grow smaller on his screen. The blue planet, home to 8 billion humans, had become the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Open a channel to the homeworld, he said quietly. I must make my report. His message was transmitted across the stars. It would take weeks to reach the Dominion Council. But Zirveth knew it would become the most important document in Velthari history. He began to speak. To the High Council of the Velthari Dominion, this is Commander Zirveth of the Earth Expedition Fleet. I am reporting our failure and our retreat. I know that failure is not accepted in our culture. I know that retreat is considered the greatest shame. But what I have witnessed demands that I speak the truth, no matter the personal cost. We did not lose because we were weak. We lost because we did not understand what we were fighting. Humans are not like other species. They are not logical. They are not efficient. They spend most of their time fighting each other over things that do not matter. They pollute their own world. They build weapons that could destroy themselves. By every measure we use to judge a species, they are failures. But those measures are wrong. Humans have a quality that we have never encountered before. They call it many things: courage, stubbornness, hope. But the most accurate word is simply this: refusal. They refuse to accept defeat. They refuse to stop fighting. They refuse to believe that anything is impossible, even when all evidence proves otherwise. I watched them attack our ships with weapons that should have been useless. They knew they would probably die. They attacked anyway. I watched civilians, people with no military training, pick up weapons and fight our soldiers in the streets. They had no chance of victory. They fought anyway. They did not fight to win. They fought because fighting is what they do. When I studied their history, I thought their endless wars were a weakness. Now, I understand the truth. Every war was practice. Every conflict made them stronger. Every generation learned from the one before. They have been preparing for us. Not deliberately, not consciously, but everything they have done as a species, every challenge they have faced and overcome, it has all been building toward this moment. They were ready for us. And we did not even know it. Zirveth paused. He looked at the planet one last time. I recommend that we classify Earth as a forbidden world. No Dominion ship should approach it. No Dominion citizen should make contact with humans. They are too dangerous. Not because of their weapons. Not because of their technology. They are dangerous because of what they are. Because of what they will become. They have reached space. They have learned that they are not alone. And they have learned that they can defeat species that are more advanced than them. One day, they will leave their world. They will spread across the galaxy. And when they do, nothing will stop them. He ended the transmission. Around him, his officers stood in silence. They had heard every word. Ambassador Kethra approached him. Commander, do you believe what you said? That they will conquer the galaxy? Zirveth shook his head slowly. Not conquer. That is our way. Humans are different. They do not want to rule other species. They just want to exist. To survive. To protect what they love. He looked at the ambassador with tired eyes. But if anything threatens them, if anything tries to take what is theirs, they will destroy it. Without hesitation. Without mercy. Without ever stopping. That is what humanity really is. Back on Earth. The celebrations lasted for days. In every city, on every continent, people gathered to share their joy. They had faced extinction. They had refused to accept it. And they had won. Jack Morrison stood on the shores of Lake Michigan, watching the sunset paint the water orange and gold. Kate Sullivan stood beside him. They had barely slept in 4 days, but neither of them wanted to miss this moment. We did it, Kate said softly. Jack nodded, but he did not smile. Not yet. This was just the first test. The Velthari are gone, but others will come. The galaxy knows we exist now. They know what we did. Kate looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear. Do you think that will make them afraid of us? Maybe. Or maybe it will make them curious. Either way, things will never be the same. They stood in silence for a long moment. Around the world, similar scenes were happening. Soldiers returning home to their families. Scientists finally getting some sleep. Leaders beginning the long work of rebuilding what had been damaged. But something had changed. Something deeper than the physical destruction. Humanity had discovered what it was capable of. Not just the weapons they could build, or the battles they could win. They had discovered that when it truly mattered, they could set aside everything that divided them. They could become one species, one people, united against any threat. The old divisions did not disappear. Nations still existed. Languages still differed. Old wounds still ached. But beneath all of that was a new understanding. They were human. All of them. And that meant something. In a small town in Texas, Greg Palmer returned to his farm. His daughter ran out to meet him before he reached the door. She was 6 years old, and she was holding her stuffed dinosaur. "Daddy," she said, "are the aliens gone?" He picked her up and held her close. "They are gone, baby. They are gone." She smiled and put her head on his shoulder. "I knew you would make them go away," she whispered. You always protect me. Palmer felt tears on his cheeks. He did not wipe them away. Always, he said. Always. Above them, the stars shone brightly. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers that humanity had not yet imagined. But the Velthari had sent a warning to every species in the known universe. That warning was simple. Do not touch Earth. Do not threaten humans. Do not make them your enemy, because if you do, they will not stop. They will not surrender. They will not rest. They will fight until the end of time if they have to. That is what humanity really is. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand. The war was over. The future was just beginning.